Hello and welcome back. How time flies. And here we are in spring. And we are back with part 3 with Peter Hitchcock. And he'll talk about going to early screenings of David Cronenberg shorts, his running with the legendary Festival Express and the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, among other amazing artists, and getting a lot of momentum in his career and making commercials, music videos, TV shows, books, which will eventually lead him to his first feature film, A Song for Us.
Anyway, so I came back. We decided to come back to Canada. The kids were 5, and I'd come back for a visit to my mother up there, and I was talking to another filmmaker guy who'd become a real estate agent at the time. Actually, he said, "You better come back here because it's getting good for film, and houses are going up, and houses back then were $70,000, right?
What year is this?
It's $70,000 for a house.
What year?
Oh yeah, what year? Well, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1978, and so we'd sort of matured, I guess, and Kim, my sweetheart partner, she was doing titles for Grease and Up in Smoke. She worked for Architectural Digest. She's a graphic designer. And so we were doing record covers as well, and so we were doing okay, but it just, I guess, coming back here seemed to be like a smart move, to be. And my sister was here as well, and so I drove all up the West Coast into Vancouver, camped half the way, right, and then went up into the Rocky Mountains with the kids, and then drove back and flew the kids back from Calgary, and that's how. We arrived back and no place to live. Let's stayed with her sister. Then Kim went off to China for a visit, and I was editing and looking after the kids. So I had got a job with Herbal Leiderman, started to cut hair come the 60s, and then I worked for a guy after that who actually worked as a producer on the IMAX films. Called David Mackay, and he had the Ontario tourism people and things like that. And so I started making films for him, for Ontario tourism. And in fact, when he moved away to the country, I ended up getting a sort of a contract with Ontario tourism for about 10 or 11 years, filming, making a library, making DVDs for them, making promotional videos. And that's what got my company going, and at the same time, I was also doing work I was a producer, director for TVO. So I made a series on how to make videos, and that's another time when we were broke doing that. I'm kind of jumping a bit between time because I also, before that, I worked as a field producer. Which I didn't even know when I went to get the job. I just needed work, and it was a film producer, and I never quite worked in television. Always worked in film, and I was the first Betacam CFTO ever had, and I was up at CFTO, and they hired me to come up with 5-minute segments of stories where people would write in, and they would want to have their thrill, and I would film it and try to create it. So this sort of like, this sort of mixture of television now with working for TVO, which is a really lovely place to work. I ended up being absolutely broke again, and like we all do. And this is, I'm sure there's an awful lot of filmmakers out there that are going through tough times. Artists, my sons are classical musicians, they're not working. Actors, this is all a very difficult time for us. So part of my stories are to try to inspire people to know that, there's always bad times, but there's also good times, and somehow we all get through them. But we bought into our second house, right, and we've been renovating it. And we thought the work was going to continue. And we were doing stuff for developers and real estate stuff as well. I went down to the States and shot a film for Potential for another producer, and it was an 8-week shoot, and I shot 8,000 feet of film for like a 12-minute film that Potential built a cinema for, and it was things like that I was doing in between that and making TV commercials for Air Canada and Ultramar Oil, and going up to Newfoundland and filming up there. This is like a long time of my life that I'm trying to talk to.
And so after you came back from LA in the late 70s, up until this new film that you just made, A Song for Us, did you try to make another movie, or did you do any shorts at all, or?
No. When I came back, I ended up getting hired by Polygram Records, and it was my first film that I did when I came back, and it was on a pianist called Frank Mills, and Frank Mills had this big hit, and so I came up with the idea of using a white and black piano and putting it in various locations, including Fort York, where we had guns going off in time with the music and stuff like that. And then I used a guy who made a homemade optical printer to do the multi-screens, and it was very kind of new at the time to do multi-screen stuff. And I'd worked on multi-screens before on a armed forces film for the cinema. But this is the first time it's sort of used as a kind of creative medium, I guess, for me anyway.
You would act on multiple screens simultaneously.
Yeah, multiple screens at the same time. So we were, and it was like it was in patterns and things like that, and it had neon lines, and it's probably awful right now when you see it, but back then we went, oh wow, cool man, and we took a white piano out onto the beach that overlooks Toronto, not the kind of the around Cherry Beach area where you can actually see a shot of the skyline, right? And the lights were going down really dark, and we turned car headlights on this piano to get our lighting and things like that. We shot it in the studio and shot it in a greenhouse, and the piano in a greenhouse and things like that. And Casa Loma, we put another piano in Casa Loma. So it was one of those kind of trying to make a film for them, and the film was quite successful. And I did again meet Frank Mills later on when I was working for Thrill of a Lifetime, when a girl wrote in that she wanted to meet Frank Mills, and we dressed Frank Mills up as a piano tuner, and she was told to come into town to the King Eddie and do an audition, and she started to play, and then Frank Mills said, "Could I show you how to do it?" And he started to play, and then she got a big smile, and so she got her thrill of a lifetime meeting Frank Mills. So anyway, so there was those little stories I have to tell you.
Right.
I worked in another film. It's difficult for me to go through it all, but it was a film on a festival here in Toronto, and I had what was not telefilm, it was the CFTC involved back then, and it was the John Lennon was going to come over to this festival and stuff like that, and that fell through. And then I went to another group called Eden Walker and to try to negotiate the rights to the Festival Express going across the country, and that fell through. And then I decided to go across and film the outside events of this right across the country, and I ended up going to the Rocky Mountains, and we literally had hardly any money. I found a really old a hippie bus that had just like a scenic bus and things like that. Then the guy with the bus showed up in Toronto, and I was able to conclude a script, that from it, and we got money from Telefilm for that, but that all kind of went down the tube, So there's lots of like failures as well along the road,
Oh yeah.
This is how you pick yourself up, right?
No, absolutely. I always think of it as like no experience is a bad experience. It's really just what you do with it.
Yeah.
And when did you decide to kind of start telling people you were a director or cameraman?
Well, Okay. First of all, it was my short film because I was directing it, right? So and so I was obviously you call yourself a director on your first film, right?
Right. But you were in England.
Yeah, no, it's here in Toronto on Yorkville.
Okay.
And with the Procol Harum music, and it was sort of like it was a sort of a to do with a love relationship like my film is now and my feature film is now. But I guess directing. I think I made a science fiction film as well before the kids were born in the 70s as well, and it was called Videotron 5, and it had actors in it, and I did a rough cut, 45 minutes, and I made it for $6,000, right? And I shot part of it out in Sheraton Studios out there, and I had a great cinematographer called Nicholas Allen Wolfe. He was a really good DOP and went on to be a real major cinematographer for TV commercials. And I cut it and I screened it for the head of what was I think it was called CFTC, like Telefilm. And the guy didn't like it. And he said, "This is awful. This is just like David Cronenberg." "No, I don't like it," And so I just gave up. I literally just gave up, and that was a time when we were, when you make your film, you're actually not earning any money, right?
Right.
And this happened a couple of times where you actually get just exhausted after it, and to try to you need to go away for 6 months. To a lodge somewhere to recover, right? But who could afford that? So I ended up starting to do more documentary work.
Okay.
And making money and making commercials, and so there was a real focus from then on to actually charge money and make money making films.
When was that? When you met that guy and he said it was like Cronenberg?
Oh, that was. Let me see. I would say it was 1970.
1970?
Yeah, 1970. I made my first film. I got some money from. I think it was Toronto. I can't remember who it was now, but they were in the Colonnade.
Okay. Well, wow. Okay, I didn't even realize Cronenberg was making things that early.
Oh, yeah. I went to see Cronenberg's very first film that he projected on the wall at that little village on Bathurst and Bloor.
Okay, I'm looking at the Wikipedia. Was it Stereo or Crimes of the Future?
No, I think it was something to do with a bathtub and a creature coming out of a bathtub.
Oh, Shivers, 1975.
No, I think it's a short.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, I see. So maybe he turned it into a feature later.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was, but he was just starting off. Same with another filmmaker called Peter Rowe was there, and so he was making films way before I was. So I was sort of like, well, there's a guy actually doing this. So he was another inspiration in a way that you can do it somehow, right?
Right, and so after that, you were just like, okay, I got to go do something else to actually make money.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was making an art film, right? I was inspired by THX 1138, the Lucas films, and it was a science fiction film, and it's all about this radical group had found a way of making a nuclear bomb, and they were being overtaken by what could I say, the government, right? So they were the rebels, and I shot it in the science center and things like that to make it kind of futuristic. shot it on 16.
Right.
I made a series called Successful Home Video with TV Ontario, and I wrote a book. It was 10,000 sold 10,000 copies actually on filmmaking actually.
Oh yeah,
probably one of the first of its kind. Yeah.
When was it?
But not the first. But it was pretty first with a book with a series. Yeah. How old was this now?
Because you told me about it before.
Yeah. This is probably we'd moved into our house, and that was a time. Boys were me. I know. It was 1990.
Oh, okay.
That I pitched 3 ideas, right? You go into TVO and you give them 3 proposals, and they picked up on this one, and so I wrote the script and developed it, and I had to write the book along with it, and I had a host who I just liked him as a host, and it turns out he knew about video as well. So, and he was a real boffin, and his name was David Stringer, and he was like a really lovely, brilliant guy, and he had a show on TVO where he had like bits, I think it's called Bits and Bytes, and he would demonstrate all kinds of technical stuff and things like that. Yeah, and so we basically, even though we had a script and all that sort of stuff, we would sit down and we'd have a cup of tea and we'd talk about what we're going to do that day. And some days we would just make things up, like I got out to the beaches there with him and a camera, and we were trying to figure out what the hell we're doing out here, and and I said, well, okay, I'm just going to pan with you going around with the sun to show people how the sunlight can affect the face, right? And it was like stuff like that we were grabbing on the way as we were making the show. And then I edited it on 3/4 inch and wrote all the time code down, and then took it into the edit suite at TVO. And that series, there was a distributor that started to distribute it, but then the sales were waning, and it's what happens with distributors. They put it in a catalog, and nobody calls them, and they don't do anything about it, and they've got something better to sell. They'll put you under the table, right? So I started to call around, and I actually managed to get it onto PBS, and that series was on PBS, and the series and books sold to the universities and colleges all over North America, and then it went to it got a Spanish version made of it. The Learning Channel in England showed it, and it was really. What started it all was me being a filmmaker and seeing that this video stuff was coming on, and seeing all this VHS, and I was trying to learn about it at the same time. And so I learned a lot about video making myself. There were things like called the Amiga and all these other bits of equipment and things like that, and it was like a great experience for me as a filmmaker to try making the switch from film to digital, right? And it's one of those another lucky breaks, really. That because you never quite know what's going to take off or what people believe you can do and things like that. And
no, I mean you never know.
You never know. No, I felt very comfortable directing. But not everybody's going to give you that chance, right? And
right.
when I started to promote myself as a director cameraman, I think I got noticed, and that's where I started to gain most of my work, from shooting commercials and better budget shows and things like that.
And that is our third part with Peter. And next episode, we'll talk in depth with Peter about his feature film. And next episode, we'll talk in depth about his feature film for us. His feature independent film, really with a lot of talent and perseverance and tenacity. Really with a lot of talent and perseverance and tenacity. See you next episode.